passenger rail agency, that's Prasa spokesperson Andiswa Makanda, joining me now to take this conversation forward. Andiswa, always a pleasure having you, and good morning.
Good morning, Tumela. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for coming through. I mean, the last time I saw you were at one of the railway stations, and you had alluded to me that it's theft and vandalism that had contributed to the state in which the railway networks were in. From the time I had seen you at the railway network, what's the work that's been put in by Prasa to ensure that you do fix up our networks?
Tumelo, from the last time we spoke, we've been doing a lot of rebuilding our infrastructure, rehabilitating our infrastructure across the country. A lot of work has gone into this. I can tell you now that we have recovered about 18 of our corridors, which is a significant improvement. We are running trains in the Western Cape, Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, in the Eastern Cape. We've returned the services, the commuters are back, and if you were to see the trains that are moving now, we have a lot of commuters using those trains, showing the demand there is for the passenger rail services. So there's a lot of work that's gone into replacing that infrastructure. But in terms of the theft and vandalism, there's a lot of work that has gone into it. We've had to re-strategize and re-look in terms of the infrastructure that we are putting on the railway network to make sure that it's vandal-proof. For instance, we have also decreased the copper content on the overhead cables that power the trains. So we are installing also anti-theft and anti-vandal clips on our tracks so that they're not easily stolen by criminals. So there's a lot of work that is happening. I mean, Prasa has to date achieved 59% of our targets. We are rebuilding, we are restoring the services. The numbers are going up, but there's a lot of work that's going into rebuilding the railway infrastructure.
Yeah. Are those interventions, though, sustainable long-term? Because one of the big questions that we're trying to ask with our focus on railway infrastructure dilapidation is, who are the beneficiaries of our railway networks being at this state? Organized crime being one of them. And if they are adamant to ensure that there's nothing for commuters to depend on when it comes to our railway networks, are those interventions by Prasa long-term, promising to be sustainable long-term?
No, definitely they are long-term. There's a lot of work that we're doing in terms of safeguarding and protecting the infrastructure. So over and above the technology, in terms of infrastructure, putting in, reducing the copper content and the anti-theft and anti-vandal clips, we also have a security plan that we've put in place. And since we've implemented that integrated security plan, we've seen less and less crimes on our railway infrastructure. So what we are doing now in terms of our security is that we're increasing boots on the ground to make sure that there are physical warm bodies that are protecting the railway infrastructure. Over and above that is to introduce technology on our networks, such as drones and so forth, to prevent the crimes from happening, so that we are not reactionary in terms of protecting the railway infrastructure, but we're also preventative. That is the strategy and approach that we're taking in terms of protecting the railway network.
Yeah, I mean, earlier on when we started our conversation, you were quite optimistic in terms of the numbers of commuters that are starting to come back and use the railway networks. But it seems that your CEO, Hisham Emran, concedes, and I just want to quote him here. This was from the 18th of May 2023, being quoted as saying, Andiswa, that the passenger rail agency of SA, obviously Prasa, has seen passenger numbers plummet from 600 million a year back in 2015-2014 financial year to 15 million in the last financial year. So definitely a gap there, just in terms of the numbers that were and where the numbers now. Surely that is of priority to you in getting those numbers back. But again, commuters need to trust that they can make use of these trains once again.
Yeah, definitely, Dumelo. I think in the heydays of Prasa, as you've rightly quoted, that we were sitting at about 500, 600 million passengers. But we are also optimistic that commuters are coming back as we restore services. Right now we're sitting at about 14, 15 million passengers per year since we've restored services, and we want that number to increase. And the only way we're going to increase those numbers is that we are planning on increasing the frequency of those train services. But also, not all our stations are operational. We had focused on some of the stations that we could quickly basically fix and rehabilitate in a short space of time while we work on a longer term on fixing the other stations that were badly vandalized. And when we have those stations up and running, we will see those numbers increase exponentially. So part of the reason why we are sitting at 14, 16 minutes, because we're not stopping at all the stations. So we're not servicing all the people in all the communities. But the plan is to restore those stations so that we are stopping in each and every community that we used to stop at. Yeah. But the numbers are quite inspiring, and we're quite confident. We are happy that commuters are coming back because we want to restore a reliable service, and we are modernizing the railway infrastructure. We have now introduced the electrical motor units, which are the blue trains that we call Stimula Sabantu, that come with a high-tech technology, CCTV, cameras inside, air conditioning, doors don't close. I mean, the train doesn't move if the doors are not closed. So you can't even have a situation where commuters will try and forcefully enter the train because of the technology that comes with these blue trains. And I'd like to see eNCA put up these trains in your walls so that people can see
what you're talking about.
We're not only rebuilding, but we're introducing modernization, giving the people, the poor of the poorest, blue trains that are modernized, that come with sophistication for the benefit of the low-income households.
So are the blue trains coming, or are they already
running?
They're already running.
They're running in Western Cape. They're running in Gauteng, in Pretoria. They're running to Soweto. So people know the yellow and grey trains, and a lot of people see these blue trains. They don't think they're Metro Rail. They don't think they belong to Prasa, and we want to communicate that we are replacing the yellow and grey trains because it's an old fleet, and we want to bring in the new trains. And I wish broadcasters such as eNCA would start using the visuals of these new trains, because I know that you do have the footage to show that we are bringing new trains. The public are not aware. We need your help to send that message that we have new trains with sophisticated technology that will make it safer for them. We've got security on board in the trains. I mean, the people who have used them, they talk about the experience of using these new trains. They are loving the trains. They just want more frequency. And we are doing so much work at Prasa to restore, because we know the importance of passenger rail infrastructure, especially for low-income households. I mean, our pricing is very affordable. For our trains to town, for example, from Soweto, you can pay 7 Rand 50 or 8 Rand 50. And for a return, that's like 17 Rand, whereas by taxi, they'll pay 50 Rand. So we know the importance of Prasa and Metro Rail in rolling out affordable transport.
So then when we also listen to the CEO, which trains is he referring to when he talks about the trains that are still yet to be rehabilitated, as well as its corridors that are currently running between 45 minutes to an hour, even during peak time, whereas in the past, that's supposed to run between 5 to 10 minutes, just in terms of peak time. I mean, if we have these blue trains and they're efficient, and more people should know about them, but at the same time, the CEO is talking about rehabilitating, that there's hope in terms of rehabilitating these trains. Which ones are these, and why is it so important to Prasa to acknowledge these?
So remember, we are using the yellow and grey trains, but the yellow and grey trains are quite old, and they need to undergo what we call general overhaul or heavy maintenance, and so that we improve the efficiency of those trains. But at the same time, we are rolling out these blue trains, but until we have all these coaches, the new ones, as we are slowly introducing them in the services, we are trying to complement the blue trains with the yellow and grey trains. But there are those trains that really need to go for the general overhaul. And we awarded that contract last year, June, to do heavy maintenance, because a lot of those trains were vandalized. There were a lot of copper content that was stolen from those trains. So we are starting that work, and we've sent some of these coaches to the general overhaul sites to be refurbished. So those are, he's referring to the yellow and grey trains in that, because we haven't released a lot of the new blue trains. So there's going to be a complementary approach where we have the yellow and grey trains and the blue trains, but slowly phasing out the yellow and grey trains. But because we still need them in some of the lines, those are the ones that need to be refurbished, rehabilitated, undergo heavy maintenance.
Okay.
And that work is already happening in KwaZulu-Natal, Western Cape and Gauteng.
All right. Well, I have to let you go, Andiswa. Before I do, though, your comment in terms of the axing of your chairperson, Mr. Leonard Ramatlakane. I mean, when I read about the axing and found out that it was due to him allegedly using, Prasa residential property for personal use, it took me back to a quote by former Transport Minister Fikile Mbalula back in 2020, who said, at the root of Prasa's problem is a deteriorating, mismanagement culture, but also poor corporate governance. Any comment as to whether that is the case even with Mr. Ramatlakane, or whether that has improved since the comments by the former Transport Minister?
I think there's a lot of rebuilding that Prasa is doing, and it's also rebuilding the integrity of the organization. And I think for me, what is quite important for the organization and the board of Prasa is that when there is wrongdoing, action is taken. And, the board does want to fulfill it does fulfill its fiduciary duties, which is why when the story of the Newlands property came out, there was an immediate investigation into the allegations. And as soon as the report came back, it was sent to the minister for deliberation and consideration, and the minister then took action. And I think that's what's important. Where there's wrongdoing, we must act. We must do something about it to root out any corruption or any action that will place the company into disrepute, because we are rebuilding the organization, the infrastructure, the integrity of the organization. So there's a lot of work happening in terms of that. We've roped in the SIU also to do a lot of the investigation. So there's a lot of work happening. We've got skills audits that is currently happening. We're soon going to start on lifestyle audits as well. SIU, we are in communication with the SIU in terms of those investigations. So there's a lot of work that's happening to root out corruption in the organization.
All right. Well, I appreciate you, Andiswa, for coming and speaking to me about this. Andiswa Makanda, Prasa spokesperson, this morning, keeping us up to date in terms of the work that's been done to not only rehabilitate, fix up some of the yellow and grey trains that we are also familiar with, but also introducing the blue trains in case you weren't aware that they are there. Andiswa saying it's time that you are aware that the high-tech and more of the secure trains are available, of course, even with its CEO, Mr. Hisham Imran, of course, saying more is being done to rejuvenate the organization, saying that there's hope and there's a recovery ongoing out in Prasa.